So now we come to the Q&A portion of this session. I think it's, instead of me reading out the questions, I think it's better for me to open the floor to the ones asking. May we have Dr. Varsunyo? Vars, would you like to unmute and show your face and direct your question to Dr. Aviso?
Yeah,
Okay.
hello everyone. So I'm Vars. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Yes.
we can hear you.
I prefer to not switch on my video. The talk of Professor Visa. So I find it very interesting. So I just want to ask, because I noticed in the presentation that the data sets used have complete information. I think that's what you mentioned. So I imagine that you will have more data sets available if you like consider data sets with missing or incomplete information. So those attributes without any value. So in which case, I'm curious, like how does the hyperbox classifier handle classification with such missing information?
Okay, thank you very much for that question. So actually, the initial test case that we did, we only, since it was the first case study that we were working on with the model, so we only looked at data that had that had complete information and tried to validate it with some data with missing information to try and see whether the rules would still work even without even without some of the information available. So these are some things that we also intend to look at in the future. Yes, we do expect that there will be missing data in most of the data sets. And yeah, so these are some developments that we look forward to in the future, like how do we actually deal with missing information. Actually, we've tried to run some data sets with missing information and looking at decision rules that would probably eliminate these attributes to be part of the if-then decision rules. So yeah, so it's still evolving. Unfortunately, for that particular case study that we're working on, we haven't completed the results yet.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Vars and Dr. Kathleen, for the answer. Now may we have Dr. Hill? Dr. Hill Mendoza?
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
well, thank you, Kathy, for that very interesting presentation. And I do think the method you're proposing is quite novel. I have already asked the question, I wrote the question on the chat, and you have responded. But I do have a follow-up question. One of these is actually was just asked about incomplete information, but a follow-up to my question is I'm a bit intrigued by when you said that the bounds are actually decision variables themselves and that they are free floating. And in my mind, when you optimize something, the decision variable is to be optimized, and you subject that to the set of fixed or set constraints. So can you elaborate a little bit more about what you mean by free floating?
Okay, so thank you very much for that question. Yeah, so essentially what the model does is try to identify the bounds for the hyperbox. So essentially what it does is try to draw boxes to enclose as much of the positive samples as possible. So when we develop the model is free to decide what would be those boundaries. It can be a lower, it needs to define a lower and an upper limit to actually enclose a particular box. So there, we have also integrated the option that the box can actually extend to infinity. So like I showed you in the presentation, it might be possible to end up with rules that are one-sided. So for such cases, it means that there is no lower bound and that it extends absolutely to infinity. On practical implementation, what we actually did is to put in the model arbitrary limits that are whose magnitude would be very, very big compared to the data sets that we were analyzing. So if the model suddenly activates limits that are really, really far off from our data sets, then we consider that to be equivalent almost to reaching positive or negative infinity, or essentially dissolving the sides of the box.
Thank you.
So are there more questions?
Hi, sir. I have a question for Mr. Defontorum.
Sure.
Uh, 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 you mentioned that regarding the validation of the results of your predictions, you are limited by the fact that you cannot go on the ground, especially during disasters. So, aside from your current validation techniques, have you considered other methods on how you could do the validation, even if you have not implemented them yet? But do you have other ideas in mind on how um, you would be performing validation in perhaps creative ways, while circumventing the need to go on the field?
Uh, Actually, we have talked about that. Are you referring for the flood validation for the EA module for the flood?
Yes, you mentioned that like you were there was a lucky instance there where in you were able to get another capture. Um,
Yes.
but other than that, my question I guess would be um, uh, in, other than just relying on taking additional captures such as that, are you considering other methods such as maybe looking at social media or crowdsourcing?
Yes, we have actually considered. Can you hear me?
Yes.
We have actually considered social media and other factors like news articles. However, the problem with using that is hindi namin makikita yung mismong flood extent kung gaano kalaki yung kung gaano kalaki yung extent ng flooding na nangyari dun sa area. What we can actually get from that is kung meron talagang existing na flood o kung merong flood na nangyari but not the actual extent. So mahihirapan din kami i-model mahihirapan rin kami validate yung mismo extent ng flood with just social media articles or news articles for that manner. What we're actually considering now is partnering with the local government authorities in case magkaroon ng another flood event. Tapos from there, if their situation allows, monitor kung gaano kalaki yung ka-wide-ranging yung baha na nangyari dun sa lugar nila. Pero I guess that would be expecting too much kasi they would be endangering their lives to just validate our model or something.
Thank you.
Can I have a follow-up question to that?
Yes, po.
Sure. Yes.
Okay. Yeah. This is also for John. I'm interested primarily from the work that you did on species identification and mapping, like coconut and mango and pili trees. And you did mention that for some of those, you used a very high resolution, like 0.5 meters. But anyway, I have actually a series of questions. So I'm interested from the validation aspect, the accuracy of those maps. Do you have a measure? What measure did you use, and how accurate are those maps in terms of where the trees actually or where the species actually are? That's my first question. And still following up on my interest in mapping trees or species. You mentioned at the start of your presentation that you use neural networks. What kind of neural network did you actually use for this? And a related question to that is, what platform or architecture did you use for your machine learning to do this? And my final question is, did you actually develop the programming code to run this? And if you have, are they open source? And can you share that? That's all. Thank you.
Okay, first, the first question I will be answering is what neural network model that we used. We actually used convolutional neural network specifically for image segmentation purposes. If you're familiar with the UNet architecture, we used that as the model for developing our AI models, the UNet architecture. And for the code for the unit architecture, it's actually open source. We just tweaked a few variables inside the unit architecture, more specifically the number of input channels that it receives. Because the original unit code is used for biomedical image segmentation, so it's a grayscale image. So the amount of input that it receives is not enough for our applications. So we actually tweaked that part, and also for the validation of our agricultural maps, this is actually put in the burden of our partners. For example, for the mango tree detection, BPSU or Batan Peninsula State University are the ones actually validating the output of the AI maps on ground sa mismong Bataan area. So they gave us training data. We produced the AI models. We produced an output for the whole Bataan, and we transferred this output to them for them to validate if there are really mango trees located on ground. So I hope that answers your question, your series of questions.
Yeah, you did. But can I have a follow-up question to that?
Yes.
Yeah, about the convolutional neural network and the use of the architecture. I think you mentioned UNet. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. And that UNet is open source, right?
Yes.
Okay. And the code that you use to do this, I'm thinking of, can I repeat what you did? Would the code be available, and would the data be available for us to work on it and maybe try it out?
The code that we did our own code. For the unit code is actually open source, but for the code that we tweaked for our purposes, it's not actually released online because it's in the process of filing for an IPA. Pero we're planning to I think we're planning to release it online sometime in the near future. We just have to take care of some pertinent legalities, which involves copyright protection for the code. But I'm positive that we will be releasing it sometime soon.
Thank you, John.
An opportunity for you both of you to collaborate. So perhaps you can discuss this offline for possible, discussions and future collaboration.
Thank you.
Yep. Okay, so Dr. Bong Montes is raising his hand. Yes, Dr. Bong.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dr. Pross, for inviting me here. And I'm very encouraged by the results. Just this will date me. Back in 1970s, we did a development study for Marinduque Island. And we had some remote sensing data from someone from the U.S. Embassy. And the resolution was like 1 hectare. And it was very broad, but at least we saw where the coconuts were and where the mangroves were and all that. But I guess my question to Mr. John is, there's an ongoing debate right now on condonation for land reform. And the argument there is that because the farmers are not able to lease out their land or because of their existing debt, is it not possible to consolidate land? Uh, and Philippine agriculture has really been lagging behind in terms of productivity because of very small land sizes. So my question is, to what extent can AI be able to help enlighten this issue? No? If are you able to detect through remote sensing the issue whether smaller plots of land aren't able to have higher productivity in terms of, for example, I don't know, tons per hectare. We have a friend, Dr. Rolly, who's saying that we're lagging behind many other countries because of the small land sizes. So I don't know to what extent AI techniques can help resolve this issue one way or another. That it will be good for better for productivity to have higher land farm sizes, for which there's a proposal I think in Bayanihan 2 for land condonation of the our agrarian reform beneficiaries. Thank you.
And
Hi, sir. Is your question how to increase the yield production? Sorry,
Can you detect the difference between productivity of farm sizes uh, depending on the size, the distribution of the farm sizes? Can you detect whether small farm sizes are have lower productivity as opposed to larger tracts of, let's say, plantation land?
As of now, sir, we're limited to just mapping mapping the crops involved, like coconut trees and mango trees. In case of analyzing the data for the application that you mentioned, I think we would have to handle our maps to the domain experts. We don't have that kind of processing ability yet. We only have an AI for mapping purposes.
Yeah, okay, thank you. The other issues was what extent can it also help in terms of land titling? This will help farmers in terms of being able to borrow from the banks if their titles are clearly designated, and if there's a way that maybe uh, Landsat is too remote for that kind of
Yes.
micro data. But I don't know if there's a way you can also help in terms of cadastral surveys.
Um, Again, sir, with that type of research or application, we would just have to provide our maps or our land cover maps if it will help to the pertinent authorities for them to assess the situation at hand. We don't have the proper authority to actually do the things that you mentioned. We can provide the maps for indicative data and for input data for the research, but other than that, I guess we don't have the proper mandate to actually assess the situation that you have given us.
Yeah, okay. I guess similar to your help by identifying how mango trees look like from very far, and on the basis of that, you can now apply the characteristics of a mango tree. Maybe there's some collaboration on the ground of, let's say, DAR agriculture, and then you can see what will be the characteristics of, let's say, farm productivity, and then maybe from going up to the satellite height, you may be able to uh, detect patterns. No? But yeah, I think it creates both on the ground intelligence plus your you know AI remote sensing technology.
okay, thank you very much, Dr. Dr. Bong. I guess it's time to wrap up. It's already past 11. It's 11:10. So if you have questions, just please send them to me. I'm going to post my email address. So it's now posted in our chat box. So just send me the questions, and I will forward them to the speakers who may be able to answer your questions best. So in this session, Dr. Didith talked about some burning issues on the cultural, gender, and other aspects of AI systems, which could be exploited by designers of these systems to, for example, manipulate humans to think and even behave in certain ways. We also heard Dr. Gani, Dean Gani, for his work on bird behavior analysis, urban sound monitoring, and also the important issues on sensor data ownership, privacy, regulation, and control, and possible abuses of such technologies, AI technologies. For example, surveillance under the guise of monitoring. And we also heard Father Sess for his insights on robo-ethics, that you cannot attribute morality to robots, which are just machines without true freedom. They're just programmed freedom, and the attribution of responsibility of the robots to the makers and the deployers of these machines, and that there is no freedom when there is no morality. Sorry, there's no morality when there's no freedom. For Dr. K, thank you for sharing with us the hyperbox classifier, which is the advantage of producing humanly interpretable rule sets, which are at the same time globally optimal and requiring only small amounts of data. Thank you to Dr. Joe for touring us into the world of Philippine robotics and sharing with us his plans to build the EECS and the College of Engineering for UP Mindanao. Good luck, Joe, and more power on that. For to Engineer John, thank you also for sharing your great work on the analysis of data from our Philippine-made satellites for societal benefit. Again, on behalf of the Philippine-American Academy of Science and Engineering, I thank you all, including all the participants, for joining this session.